Blog Talk Radio.
Michamo Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit Neye Odirada Medinde Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akhan Akwamuman Amaruka Atifi Odwirafo. That means greetings to all Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning Africans, black people. Today is Odwira Day, Purification Day. My name is Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akhan, Odwirafo of the Akwamu Nation in North America. Yet I say we thank you for tuning in to the broadcast once again. We are opening up the chat room right now. We're going to place a few links in the chat room of the information that we will be covering tonight. First link is the OBARIMA publication, OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood. That's a direct link to the book itself, the ebook version of the book. And we'll also place the link to our publications page, the Oman page, where you can access all of our 16 books. We have 16 books that we have published. All of the ebook versions of our books are free downloads. We have made them available as free downloads from our website. In addition to that, we also have the soft cover versions of the 16 books that we publish and print ourselves in-house. So those are available as well. So we do sell the soft cover versions of our publications, but the free ebook versions of our publications are all available on the Nhoma page. We also have 60 plus articles that we have published. The link to the Mu page is also on the publications page, so you can see all of the 16 books. You'll also see a link to the page dealing with the articles, and you can link there as well. We have broadcast to date 144 Blog Talk Radio shows. All of the archives you can download directly from our channel. In addition to that, we also have a Odwirafo channel on YouTube. We've uploaded many of the broadcast archives in the form of videos for YouTube. So you can go to our YouTube page, watch those videos as well of the broadcast, as well as share those broadcasts. You can follow us on YouTube, subscribe to us on this Blog Talk Radio page. Hit the follow button. That way, anytime a new broadcast comes out, anytime a new announcement is released, anytime we publish a new book, you'll be on the email list to receive that notification. You can also follow us as Kwesi, Akhan, or Odwirafo on Facebook. And we also have our separate social media network. We'll put that link in the chat room right now. Afuraitkaitnit.ning.com. So when you go to that website, that is a separate social media network that we created specifically for the study of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion, culture, and nation building. So you can join that site. We'll approve you. You can create a profile. We post blogs. We post discussions, videos, articles, all of those different things. People are interacting from here in this country as well as around the world. Our people, of course, all who are studying the same information. In addition to that, there are individuals who have begun to form Nanasom Feku, which are ancestral religion study groups around the country. And you'll see some of those members have posted the links, created groups for their study groups as well, so you can see what people are doing. Connect with individuals who are studying the same thing. You may find that there are individuals in your area who are studying the same information. If not, you can form a feku, a study group, with one or more individuals, whether you meet in person or you meet online. If you go to our feku page, and we'll put the link there in the chat room as well. The feku page on the Odwirafo.com website, you see what we're talking about, the nature of the feku, the study group, on how to form such a study group. Of course, it is your own independent formation. And then we have a recommended curriculum, starting with our publication, Kukutuntun, the Ancestral Jurisdiction, which deals with the cosmological foundation of creation, the origin of the world, and Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, the nature of the Supreme Being, Great Mother and Great Father, the nature of the divinity, the forces of nature, the nature of the ancestresses and ancestors, the Nanano Nsamanfo, the nature of the nature spirits and so forth, and the origin of the white snare offspring of spirits of disorder. And then we also deal with the origins of the fictional characters of the Bible, Quran, and Talmud, including Jesus, Yeshua ben Pandera, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Moses, Aaron, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, Muhammad, Allah, Yahweh, Buddha, Brahman. All of these characters are absolutely fictional cartoon characters who never existed of any race or in any form whatsoever. So we start off with that publication. That's the first publication in the study curriculum. The second piece is the Uben Shang, the Ancestral Summons. Third piece is the Wabo Jita. So when you go to the FECU page, the page dealing with the study groups, you'll see all of that information. So, and of course, you link onto the Afuraitkaitnit.ning.com website. That is our social media network. For individuals who are new to the information, new to the broadcast, we have 3 broadcasts on a weekly basis. We have Akhan Nanasom, Ancient, Authentic, Akhan, Ancestral Religion on Joda on Monday nights, where we deal specifically with the Akhan expression of ancestral religion. On Ojidat, which is tonight, Benada, Tuesday night, we deal with Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion in general and how it impacts every aspect of our lives, thought, intention, and action. On Akuada, Wednesday, we have Egua Marketplace. We have individuals who come onto our show to share with us their products and services, their businesses, organizations, and institutions. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, African Black people who are serving our community in a positive capacity. So they come on to share the work that they are doing, share their business, their products, their services, and so forth with us. And we will, of course, seek to support them 100%. So we've had a number of individuals come on, and what we have done in that vein is we have published the Akhan economic development model. It's a model of economic development rooted in Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religious values, rooted in Nanasom. So we have published that model, and when you go to our Akhan economic development page on our website, we'll put that link in the chat room as well, you will see that you can download the Akhan economic development model. You can download that publication. It's free. You'll also see the 4-part series that we did on the Akhan economic development model on Blog Talk Radio. You can download those 4 videos, as well as the Egua Kodi economic warfare video. And you'll also see the list of businesses, organizations, and institutions who have come onto the show. And that list is growing. You will see the list of those businesses. You will see their link directly to their website. You'll also see the link to the 2-hour interviews that they did with us on Blog Talk, talking about their business, organization, institution, product, service, how they serve the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit community, and how their philosophy of service to the community is rooted and informed by their ancestral religious values. So, as part of the Akhan economic development model is our strategy to starve the beast and feed the prize. So that means we make an assessment on a weekly basis to determine what funds we would have potentially wasted with the whites and their offspring, our enemies, at their businesses. We starve that white beast and we feed the prize. We redirect and reallocate those funds away from Starbucks, away from McDonald's, away from CVS, away from Walmart, and so forth, and direct them to the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit business, organization, or institution of the week. We are targeting one business, organization, or institution per week for 52 weeks. We're on week number 17, so you will see the various businesses we have supported as a community on a weekly basis, and this list is ever growing. You'll see that on the website. We are targeting one business, organization, or institution per week because we would like to have and allow them to achieve an optimal capital infusion from the community. So therefore, as we always say, if you take the $10 throughout the course of a 7-day week that you may have wasted at Starbucks, and you starve that white beast and feed the pride and give that $10, make a donation to the business of the week, or purchase one of their products or services for the business of the week, then yourself, in connection with 1,000 other Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people doing the same thing, will allow this business of the week, this Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit business of the week, to receive a $10,000 infusion of capital directly from the from the community, away from the White Narrow Spring, and directly from our community. So that infusion of capital, of course, will allow them to keep their business open, expand their services, hire within the community, serve us at a greater capacity, and so forth. It's a win-win situation all around. If we do not do that, then by default, we're leaving that $10,000 in the coffers of our absolute enemies, the White Narrow Spring, so that they can feed their children, send their children to school, purchase homes, cars, and everything else. Wherever we get a chance, starve the beast and feed the prize, this is what we must do. So this is what the Akhan economic development model is, and of course, we deal with that on Egua Marketplace Day. All right, so now we're going to get into the information for tonight. ODWIRA means purification. That is the name of the show on Abinada Tuesdays. Purification, also a celebration of purification. And of course, that is the Akhan language, but in ancient Kemet and Khanat, ancient Egypt and Nubia, the term Jira means purification. It also means a celebration of purification, because it is the same term. We dealt with that in detail on our show last night as we talked about ODWIRA mind, the ODWIRA nation, a term, a descriptive title of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit in the West. Those of us who were forced into enslavement in the Western Hemisphere, but we have arrived, we have emerged, waging war against the enemy. We freed ourselves from enslavement. Those of us who held on to our ancestral traditions in a purified fashion, who were motivated by the forces in nature, the Obosom, and our ancestresses and ancestors who are cultivated, the Nananom Msamanfo, we were guided and empowered by them to wage war against the White Narrow Spring and bring an end to enslavement in the Western Hemisphere. And because we have returned to our culture, we have purified ourselves. We are ODWIRA mind, the purified nation. We are a nation unto ourselves. Those in the so-called diaspora. We are ODWIRA mind, the ODWIRA nation, the purified nation. And when we embrace our culture, we are moving forward to reestablish our independence, sovereignty, self-rule, self-governance, and our defense of that self-rule on our own independent land in the Western Hemisphere as well as on the continent. So we were dealing with that last night. Check that broadcast out. ODWIRA mind, purified nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit in the West. So we talk about ODWIRA on this show, purification, and we deal with ODWIRA operationalizes Nanasom. Purification operationalizes Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion. Nanasom is our title for ancestral religion. We show the etymology of that term going directly back to ancient Khanat and Kamit. In essence, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. That means through ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual, we reject, repel, hate, repulse those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject in order to restore balance to our lives, restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions. So the expansive and contractive poles of Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion, no matter what form it takes. It's the ritual incorporation of divine law, the ritual restoration of divine balance. ODWIRA, purification, operationalizes nanason. It is through purification that we operationalize the practice of ritually incorporating law and ritually restoring balance to our lives, moment to moment, day to day, month to month, year to year, lifetime to ancestral life to lifetime. So this is why we deal with nanason as it impacts every aspect of our lives. We've done broadcasts talking about how nanason defeated slavery, how we utilize nanason to overcome alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, and other drug addictions, how we utilize nanason to address every issue in our lives. We don't have to look outside of our culture to solve our problems, whether they're political, social, economic, spiritual, emotional, psychological, and what have you. Everything we need to overcome any obstacle and solve every problem can be found within our culture. As we've spoken about before, and we show in the Uben Shane, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion animates the culture. Our culture, our way of life is animated by ancestral religion. It is animated through our capacity to align ourselves with order and restore balance to our lives through ritual when imbalance occurs. So this is what we're dealing with on ODWIRA Purification Day. Tonight's topic, Satiu, from archers to snipers, Mentu, and the execution of the enemy. In ancient Khanat, Nubia, and ancient Kamit, the term Sati or Seti means archery. We're dealing with archery to shoot arrows and so forth. And when you see the Mentu, you see the hieroglyphs, you see the arrows penetrating animal hide and so forth, talking about shooting, expectorating, releasing, projecting, missiles, and so forth. So the Sati and the land, Ta, Sati, or Ta, Seti, was the land of the bow, the land of the archer, land of archery. The people of Khanat, a title of ancient Nubia, they had the military structure, and their archers were known and renowned for thousands of years as being the greatest archers in the world. So what we're dealing with here is a science, it's a practice, it's ancestrally inherited. It is connected in many respects to different Obosom, but we're dealing with the Obosom Mentu or Muntu, the divinity of war, connected to Amen, Mut, and different divinities seated in Armat, or what they would call later Hermantis, Hermont, the sacred sanctuary of Muntu or Mentu, in the region of Ta'apet, in the nome of Ta'apet, so-called Thebes. You'll see Mentu as a hawk-headed divinity of war, but he's also a divinity commitment with regard to family life. As you'll see in certain texts, infidelity in marriage and so forth is called the abomination of Mentu. So he deals with commitment not only to a union, but also commitment to the preservation of the greater union, which is the nation. When you're committed to the preservation of the greater union of the nation, you are a warrior, waging war, also a warrioress. So Mentu is the divinity of war. You'll see him connected with the Aten, with the sun. You'll see him with the tall plumes and the sun sitting in between the tall plumes on his crown. He is sometimes called Mentu Ra. Mentu is a patron divinity, a patron Obosom of OBARIMA, Afurakani, manhood in Akwamuman, Amaruka, Atifi, the Akwamu nation in North America. So if you go to our publication, OBARIMA, Afurakani, manhood, and we put the link in the chat room. If you scroll down very quickly, you just want to show that specific page where we address Mentu, and that page, you see that page is page number 24. I'm going to read through that very quickly. Mentu, or Mentu Ra, also pronounced Muntu, a major Ntoro, major divinity, god of war, as depicted in Kemetum. We show the depiction, and the same depiction that we have on the notification for tonight's show. He is the instructor of the Ptah, the king, the sovereign, and enforcer of morality in family relationships. As such, Mentu Ra is the teacher of the young Afurakani male who will grow up to be OBARIMA, man, and sovereign of himself, his function in creation, his morality, and his domain. The name and function of Mentu Ra was corrupted by the whites and their offspring into Mentu, Mentura, or mentor, and given a perverse meaning and false etymology, which has no basis in Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, and African culture, and thus no basis in reality. So their corruption of the name mentor and associating it with some white Greek perverted dissexual nonsense, in reality, they're corrupting a title of an actual force in nature that's primordial. Of course, the forces in nature existed before we existed. Of course, us dealing with this force in nature predates the existence of the whites and their offspring on earth. Mentura, becoming Mentura, Mentura, Mentor, and Mentor, the corruption. The Osansa, the hot, fierce warrior who attacks his enemies with the greatest force and power. He is relentless in his pursuit. This force connected with Mentura is felt through the explosive power of adrenaline in connection with the heart and spirit to fight and annihilate disorder and its purveyors. Mentura is the patron Ntoro divinity, the Obosom, the divinity connected with the male of OBARIMA, of Afurakani manhood, in Akwamuman, Amaruka, Atifi, in the Akwamu nation in North America. So we talk about Mentu in that capacity. He is a divinity of war, on one hand, preserving the union, preserving the oman, waging war against the enemy. At the same time, he is the enforcer of morality on a microcosm. The microcosm, the union, which is the family structure, the home. Enforcing morality there, enforcing commitment there, and at the same time, at the greater macrocosmic level, enforcing commitment to the nation, commitment to the values of the nation, preserving the integrity of the nation. We talked about Mentu dealing with warfare in connection with the adrenal glands and adrenaline. We're going to deal with that biological function as well. But his function with regard to warfare and the Satiu, Taseti, dealing with bows and arrows and so forth, waging war. When you look at the images of the Khanit or Nubian archers, we show an image from the so-called Middle Empire of these Khanit archers, these Satiu, with their bows and arrows, conscripted by even the kings and queen mothers of ancient Kemet to participate as mercenaries within the army, to wage war against the enemy, to wage war against the invading whites and their offspring, to wipe out the whites and their offspring with their bows and their weapons. They were able to with pinpoint accuracy, wipe out the whites and their offspring. We went from archers to snipers. The archers of the past are the snipers in the present. Those individuals who are governed by the divinity, the Obosom Mentu, Mentu Ra, the divinity of war, still governed by that divinity. Some people are born and connected with this force in nature that governs their cry, that governs their patriclan ancestresses and ancestors, carries the tumi, the divine power of this force in nature. So such an individual is naturally inclined to wage war against the enemy for the preservation of the oman, the preservation of the union. They're naturally inclined to use the weapons of warfare utilized by Mentu. We went from archers to snipers. And when they align with this force in nature that governs their okra, that was assigned to them pre-incarnation, before their spirit entered the womb. They were assigned to this force in nature, this okumfo, this warrior divinity. They were assigned to this force in nature by Nyamewa and Nyame, the great mother and great father. So when they came into the womb, their spirits were infused with the fire of Mentu, Mentu Ra. So when they come into the world, they're naturally inclined towards enforcement functions. They'll naturally be drawn to military-type functions and traditional policing with regard to Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, traditional policing functions. They'll be seeking out disorder, to eradicate disorder, seeking out the purveyors of disorder, to exterminate the purveyors of disorder. When you look at the archers and the releasing of the bows, releasing of the arrows with the bows, you look at the modern day sniper, and it's the same process, the same projectile, the same missile in a different form. This is the explosive power of Mentu. Let's look at his symbolism as is manifest in the body. If you look at his symbolism and his structure within the body, and you look at the name of Mentu, you'll see that Ment and Menti, often they'll say it has, you see two organs. Sometimes they'll say for females it's the two breasts, but then you'll have other spellings of Mentu or Menti, and it's dealing with two organs, and they don't know what those two organs are. T dealing with dual, and the men meaning those stable organs. What are the two organs that Menti is dealing with? That's the root of Mentu. What are those two organs within the body shown in the Medutu? The two flesh determinatives dealing with two organs shown in the Medutu related to Mentu. He's a divinity of force, of power, of war, explosive power. So when you look at the adrenal gland, you'll see that these two glands, the kidneys, on top of the kidneys, the suprarenal glands or the adrenal glands, ad meaning near or close to, renal meaning the kidney system. So you have these two organs. These are the two organs that you see that are represented in the determinative in the language of ancient Kemet, that they have a question mark about. But this is the shrine of Mentu in the body. So you see the adrenal glands, of course, one of the things that they generate is adrenaline. That is hormone that allows us to be explosive in our response. That fight or flight response. That explosion of power that causes us to increase our heart rate and increase the level of blood flow to the areas that are needed so we can wage war, fight, or flight when necessary. This is the explosive power of Mentu in the body. So when you look at the adrenal gland, the shrine of Mentu in the body, you have the adrenal cortex, you have the adrenal medulla, you have hormones that are secreted by the adrenal cortex that have to do with vital aspects of life. And then you have hormones such as cortisol that regulates metabolism, helps your body respond to stress. Aldosterone helps to control blood pressure. Then you have the adrenal medulla, the inner part of the gland produces non-essential hormones. Adrenaline allows you to explode when you need to explode. When you look at what they call epinephrine, that is the same thing as adrenaline. It rapidly responds to stress by increasing your heart rate, rushing blood to the muscles in the brain. It also spikes your blood sugar level by helping to convert glycogen and glucose in the liver and so forth. Norepinephrine, also known as noradrenaline, it works with epinephrine in responding to stress. It narrows the blood vessels and so forth. So you have the explosive power coming from the adrenal medulla. But from the adrenal cortex, you have the other hormones that are secreted, hydrocortisone, commonly known as cortisol, and you can get this information in various places on the internet and so forth. Hydrocortisone regulates how the body converts fat, proteins, and carbohydrates to energy. It also helps to regulate blood pressure and cardiovascular function. Corticosterone, this hormone works with hydrocortisone to regulate immune response and suppress inflammatory reaction. So on one hand, you're dealing with regulating blood pressure, regulating the immune response, and so forth, converting fats, proteins. This is dealing with the internal, dealing with the domestic, dealing with the preservation of the body, and so forth. This is one of Mentu's functions, is the preservation of the union and the home. Infidelity, as it says in the text, is the abomination of Mentu because that splits the male and female, and it also disrupts the family union. So you're dealing with that which is domestic, internal, the home, and so forth, when you're dealing with the adrenal cortex and the hormones, hydrocortisone, corticosterol. But when you deal with the adrenal medulla, that's where you deal with epinephrine, norepinephrine. You're dealing with adrenaline, the explosive power needed to deal with external affairs, foreign affairs. Those which are attacking from the outside, we need that explosive power to wage war. So you have those functions within the adrenal gland. These two different glands are the Mentu, the two T men within the body, the shrine of Mentu. This is the divinity's shrine in the body. So when we invoke this force in nature and we connect with this force in nature, he connects with us through the adrenal glands. That is the shrine. Of course, we have shrines for this Obosom. We include this Obosom in Oshwe, in libation, on a consistent basis. This is a force in nature. And as we said earlier, we have individuals who are directly connected to this force in nature, assigned to this divinity by Nyamewa Nyame. And as they grow and develop, they're naturally inclined towards that kind of behavior. They're naturally inclined towards projectile, missile, explosion, adrenaline, releasing what needs to be released to attack and destroy the enemy. These are the same Khanit, the same ancient Nubian archers who have returned through our blood circles and are manifest today, and they become naturally inclined towards the kinds of firearms that they will take up to snipe, to shoot, to attack the enemy. So when the enemy is attacking our people, the sniper shows up. The Satiu shows up. And you can't stop a sniper when they decide they're going to get up that particular day and wage war against the enemy, wage war against these criminals who are gunning our people down. You cannot track a sniper. You cannot determine when they're going to get up one day and Mentu, the divinity that dwells in the head region, in the kra of the individual, will direct them that particular day to get up and wage war against the enemy. You cannot predict it and you cannot stop it. Nobody can stop that. This is one of the reasons why the whites in their offspring do not want us to re-embrace our ancestral religion. Because when we re-embrace Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion, then we only obey what the Obosom who are connected to our blood circle, who are dwelling within us, direct us to engage in. We only obey the Nananum Nsamanso, our spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. And we do not broadcast what they teach us and direct us to do. We just get up and move without any notification. We only obey Inyamewa, Inyame, the Supreme Being, the Great Mother and Great Father. And when they direct us through the agency of the Obosom, the agency of the Nananom Nsamanfo, the agency of the deities and ancestresses and ancestors who are assigned to us pre-incarnation and who have been connected to us since we came into the womb, when they communicate with us through the agency of the divinity and the ancestral spirit, then we move based on that communication. And we execute based on that communication. So let us look at some information dealing with the bows and arrows in ancient Kemet. And you can get this information once again from different sources, but we want to show the connection between this information, how it's related to that force in nature, and how it's related to one of the aspects of warfare, one of the most deadly and accurate aspects of warfare. When one of these criminal cops murders our people, when a child of Mentu decides they're going to get up and rise up and follow the direction and motivation and power of Mentu, no individual can stop that individual because they don't know where the individual is coming from. When they are motivated by their own craft, their soul, their divine consciousness, when they're motivated by the supreme being to get up and wage war in the manner that Mentu directs them, and they engage in that archery, that ancient archery, which becomes sniping today. You cannot stop that. And once the children of Mentu begin to wage war according to their nature, you'll see a lot of dead criminals bleeding in the street. Let's look at a text from ancient Kamit. We're going to look at the stela, a portion of the stela of Amenhotep II. And when you look at that particular stela, they say Amenhotep II, when he was at war, he drew 300 of the bows hardest to bend in order to examine the workmanship, to distinguish between a worker who doesn't know his profession and the expert. After choosing a bow without flaw, which only he could draw, he came to the northern shooting range and found they had prepared for him 4 targets made of Asiatic copper thick as a man's palm, 20 cubits divided between the poles. When his majesty appeared in his chariot like Mentu, with all his power, he reached for his bow and grabbed 4 arrows with one hand. He speeded his chariot, shooting at the target like Mentu the god. His arrow penetrated the target, cleaving it. He drew his bow once again at the second target. None had ever hit a target like this. None had ever heard that a man shot an arrow, a target made of copper, and that it should cleave the target and fall to the ground. None but the king, strong and powerful as Amen, made him a conqueror. So that is just one of the texts dealing with the functioning of the child of Mentu, the kings of ancient Kemet, some of them named after Mentu, Hetep the first and second and so forth. Children of Mentu guided by Amen. So in this particular text, it lays out a structure, a pattern, a precedent for the children of Mentu when they're waging war. So when he takes out and he appears in his chariot, appears in his vehicle, riding on the enemy, appears like Mentu with all his power, he reaches for his bow and grabs 4 arrows with one hand. He reaches for that heat. The divinity Mentu operating through the scorching power of the sun. And he has the sun disk on his head. And he grabs the bow. So he's reaching for his heat. So in the community, we talk about the weapons. We call it, we're grabbing the heat. He's riding in his chariot. He's about to ride on the enemy. He reaches for his bow and grabs 4 arrows with one hand. He's reaching for his heat. He speeded his chariot, shooting at the target, driving by the target, like Mentu the god. His arrow penetrated the target, cleaving it, splitting the enemy. After we blast on the enemy, he drew his bow again at the second target. None had ever hit a target like this. None had ever heard that a man shot an arrow, a target made of copper, and that it should cleave or split the target and fall to the ground. None but the king, strong and powerful as Amen, made him a conqueror. We said Amen made him a conqueror. The supreme being directing this child of Mentu to wage war against the enemy, to ride on the enemy, blast the enemy, split the enemy in half, guided by Amen under the power and the direction of Mentu, the archer or the sniper. Just as it was in the past with our people who are children of Mentu, so it is today for the people who are children of Mentu. And once they re-embrace who they are, once you re-embrace who you are, and you align with your own soul, your crop, nobody can step in between that communication that you have with your own crop. Nobody can step in between that communication that you have with Nyame wa Nyame, or Amenet and Amen. And just as Amen, the conqueror, made Amenhotep the second, the conqueror, directing him under the power of Mentu, Amen or Nyame makes you the conqueror under the power of Mentu today. Let's look at our text, OBARIMA, Afurakani Manhood. We're going to go to the section dealing with Benna. And when we go to that particular section, Benna, the force in nature that operates through the planet Benna, so-called Mars, also called Abena, Rubehudet, and Sechima, Sekmet, called Benna and Abena in the Akhan tradition, operating through the divine immune system and lymphatic system within the great divine body, as well as the immune system and lymphatic system within the body of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. But we also talked about how Mentu, through the operation of the adrenal gland, releasing that explosive power, also having to do with immunity. There's a connection between Mentu and Benna, Herubehudet, and Abena, Sechima. So we're going to get into that. And this is why right after this section in the book, we have the information with regard to Mentu after this particular section. In OBARIMA, Afurakani Manhood, we have this publication is broken down into 7 sections. Each one of the sections connected to the Obosom, the forces in nature that animate the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7-day week. So each one of these 7 principal values of Afurakani manhood, OBARIMA, meaning man. Each one of these 7 principal values are connected to the Obosom that govern the 7 days of the week. So that means it is a holistic set of 7 principal values, carrying the energy of the Obosom connected to that particular planetary, solar, lunar, or planetary body. For example, the 3rd principal value in the book is connected with the 3rd day of the week. The 3rd day of the week is animated by the planet Benna, or Abenna, so-called Mars, the red planet, the planet of war, and so forth. Benna and Abenna are the major divinities that animate that planet. But Mentu is connected as well. And just like you have different features of the planet Earth, oceans, rivers, the core of Earth, the atmosphere, and so forth, and Obosom that animate these different features, the same is true of the other planets as well. So Mentu has a portion, has a region of Benna as well, although the major divinities that govern that planet is Benna and Abenna and so forth. So the 3rd principal value of OBARIMA, the 3rd section of the book, is also connected to the 3rd day of the week, which is governed by the planet Benna, Abenna, that is connected to those forces in nature, but also Mentu as well, and this is why we want to touch on this specific section. So if you look on page 17 in this publication, the 3rd principal value of OBARIMA directs us to arm. Arm yourself to defend the order and balance with your life. This is the 3rd principal value of OBARIMA, Afurakani manhood. The 1st principal value is order. Recognize the divine order of creation, the balance of male and female. That starts off with the foundational balance in creation, the great mother and the great father, Amenet and Amen, Nyamewa and Inyame, Mawu and Lisa, Komosu and Chukwu, the great mother and great father. So the 1st principal value of manhood as well as womanhood. Recognize the divine balance of male and female, the order of creation. You cannot not function as an OBARIMA, an Afurakani man, if you do not recognize the divine order that governs all of creation, rooted in that foundational relationship of Aminet and Amen, the two complementary halves of the great divine whole, Nyamewa Nyame, the supreme being. So you must first recognize order, the order of creation, the balance of male and female, divine balance. The second principal value is balance. Establish that balance in every aspect of your life. So first you must recognize that balance is the order of creation. If you don't recognize that, you're going to be imbalanced from the jump, from the gate. But once you recognize that divine order, which is the balance of male and female, the second principal value is you must establish that balance in every aspect of your life. Whether it's your physiological balance, dealing with diet, whether it's dealing with your emotional balance, dealing with psychological balance, mental balance, the balance between work and rest, exercise, sleep, inhalation, exhalation, consumption, elimination in a harmonious fashion. Every activity manifests a balance in truth. So first you recognize the divine order of creation, the divine balance of male and female, and then you establish that balance in every aspect of your life, physical and non-physical. And once you have established that balance in every aspect of your life individually, as well as with your spouse and your children, your family, and so forth, now that the balance has been established in every aspect of your life, the third principal value that we're dealing with here is arm. Arm yourself to defend the order and balance with your life. Every Afuraitkaitnit African individual born in America is born behind enemy lines. And Afurakani OBARIMA, man recognizes the reality that we are engaged in a protracted war with the whites and their offspring, which has continued for over 12,000 years and will continue until we make them extinct. You have inherited a war. You were born into a war zone. In the so-called Iraq War, it is suggested that over 4,000 Americans died by the 5-year mark. 47,000 Afuraitkaitnit in the United States alone die every year from smoking-related cancer. That's approximately 235,000 in 5 years, times the amount of casualties connected to the so-called Iraq War's 5-year mark. We must realize where the real war is being waged against us. The whites and their offspring claim to have been looking for chemical and biological weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Of course, the whites and their offspring flood our communities with cigarettes, cigars, marijuana, alcohol, crack cocaine, heroin, and various other drugs. These are chemical and biological weapons of mass destruction being used by them in as chemical and biological warfare against us. It is estimated that approximately 500,000 Afuraitkaitnit were enslaved in North America over the course of 350 plus years. In reality, the numbers are 10 times that amount. Over 5 million of us were enslaved in North America over hundreds of years, while other millions, 95 plus million, were sent to South America, the Caribbean, Europe, died as well on the Middle Passage, and so forth. During the physical enslavement process, our ancestresses and ancestors were forced to work from sunrise to sunset. Most died within the first 3 to 7 years on the plantation. They were worked to death. When we look at the chemical and biological war being waged against us, we can see that our bodies are still being worked to death whenever we ingest the above-mentioned toxic substances. Indeed, more of us have died in 11 years, over 500,000, from smoking cigarettes alone, than the number of us that it is falsely claimed died during the 350 plus years of physical enslavement, 500,000. Today, the number of Afuraitkaitnit in America addicted to or hooked on cigarettes alone is 5 million. There are just as many Afuraitkaitnit whose bodies are enslaved by cigarettes alone, at this moment, as the actual number of our bodies, persons that were physically enslaved over the course of 350 plus years. The whites and their offspring are murdering us physically at a higher rate than they did during the entire enslavement period. Taking 350 plus years to enslave 5 million people, while they can enslave the bodies of 5 million people instantly at the same time through cigarettes. The war has not stopped. The whites and their offspring did not take slaves from Afuraitkaitnit. They took soldiers, warriors, says, architects, physicians, and others who became enslaved. These ancestresses and ancestors of ours were prisoners of war. They were fundamentally soldiers captured in the wars of aggression, fighting to sustain our independence. We must understand that the white Arab and white Indian enslaved Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit prisoners of war centuries before the Europeans were strong enough to participate. This era is often called the era of the Arab slave trade or Indian Ocean slave trade. Moreover, during what is called the Tang Dynasty in China, over 1,400 years ago, the Chinese were enslaving Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit prisoners of war whenever they were able. This lasted for centuries. Once the Europeans were able to participate, the Europeans worked with the Arabs, Indians, and Asians to enslave Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit. Once in America, many so-called native, quote-unquote native Americans enslaved Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit along with the Europeans. This is no wonder, being that the so-called quote-unquote native American is not quote-unquote native at all. They are descendants of white Asians who migrated to America a few thousand years ago. The only true native in America is the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, male and female. For some of our people migrated to America thousands of years before Asians or Caucasians existed on Asasiafor. And when those white Asians from Siberia, who have been shown genetically to be connected to white Asians in Siberia, as well as Western Eurasians, when they invaded the Western Hemisphere, they waged war against the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, our people who were already here. So these pseudo-Native Americans are migrant Asians, invaders. They have been our enemies from the beginning and still are today. They are not our brothers and sisters, but they call themselves pseudo-Native Americans. They call themselves white Hispanics, white Latinos, and so forth. These are our enemies. They are the whites and their offspring. During the physical enslavement of our people, Caucasians and Asians worked together. The white Arab became a middleman and agent. He would purchase and or capture prisoners of war on the continent and deliver us up to the Caucasian in America, the Caribbean and Europe. Most Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit in America will be forced to work on plantations. The number one cash crop that our ancestresses and ancestors were initially forced to grow was not cotton. It was tobacco as well as hemp, marijuana. Therefore, millions of Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit were enslaved in America in order to pick tobacco as well as hemp. Today, the direct physical descendants of those white tobacco plantation owners, the so-called slave owners, still own those tobacco plantations. They still grow tobacco. It is from those same plantations that the major cigarette companies get the tobacco to manufacture their products. The descendants of the white plantation owners are the owners of the tobacco cigarette company. However, when an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit individual goes to a gas station or a convenience store, he or she purchases the tobacco products, the cigarettes or cigars, from the shop owner, who is often Arab, Indian, or Asian. Therefore, just as the Arab, Indian, and Asian played the middleman during the enslavement of our people by delivering us up as property, sources of wealth to the white plantation owner, so are the Caucasians and Asians, Arabs, Indians working together today. We still pick tobacco from the shelves of convenience stores, gas stations. We enrich the Caucasian plantation owner, cigarette company owner, and the middleman, Arabs, Indians, and Asians, who deliver us up to the plantation owners, corporation owners, while our bodies are worked to death via lung cancer and other diseases. At the same time, The only difference in this era is that they are murdering more of us faster. And we also deal with the notion of hemp. And of course, the whites and their offspring are rapidly decriminalizing and legalizing marijuana. They would like to make our people a nation of zombies. They know the destructive effects of marijuana upon Obosom, melanin, on sperm cells, ovum cells, the synaptic cleft within the brain. They know the spiritual effect, not only the physical carcinogenic effect, spiritual effect. When we open ourselves up to taking these toxic substances and we disrupt our mind and disalign our spirit, then we make ourselves open and receptive to spirits of disorder. And they begin to flood our sphere of awareness with thoughts and intentions and foolish ideas and self-destructive ideas and behaviors. And then we begin to act on these self-destructive ideas and behaviors. And then we incorporate stupid, foolish rationalizations coming directly from these perverse, criminal, child molesting type individuals who died as child molesters, died as murderers, died as rapists, died as crackheads, died as alcoholics, these same corrupt individuals, discordant individuals. When their spirits left their bodies, they're still hanging around earthbound, and they're still projecting that kind of filthy, degenerate behavior and mindset on the people. You make yourself receptive to those projections. You receive those projections and assume they're your own thoughts. You receive those stupid rationalizations for smoking marijuana and assume that they're your own thoughts. And then you act based on those foolish rationalizations, engaging in self-destructive behavior. The whites and offspring have known this all along. They've given you a key to it or a clue to it by simply calling alcohol spirit. So when you drink spirit, what they're really saying is what we've known cosmologically for thousands of years. When you poison your system, just like when toxins, bacteria, agents, free radicals, and so forth, toxic substances, bacteria enter into your system. If you've weakened your immune system, you've compromised your immune system cells are not able to kill this bacteria, kill these viral agents, and then they take over the body. If you lowered your spiritual immunity, then those toxic viral spirits, these deceased, wayward spirits, these viral spirits will begin to influence you, and you won't be able to sanction what's streaming into your sphere of awareness that are your own thoughts and the foolishness coming from these toxic viral agents. And they flood your consciousness with foolish ideas, and you embrace that as your own and begin to operate on it and spread that foolishness. And this is how our people begin to move in the direction of becoming drug addicts, a nation of zombies. And the whites and their offspring are rapidly moving to decriminalize not just marijuana, but cocaine and every other drug as well. At the same time, they're also relaxing the immigration law. So you have a flood of millions of the whites and their offspring, so-called Native Americans, so-called white Hispanics, white Latinos, will all of a sudden be, quote-unquote, legal. The few little jobs that we have, they're designed to move forward and take those positions. At the same time, they're decriminalizing drugs so our people will be strung out, not just on alcohol, but marijuana, cocaine, heroin, and every other drug. While we're smoked out and dying and disrupting our reproduction rates and so forth, the whites and their offspring are taking a firmer grip of control over the economy and the potential that we would have had to grow and expand and take over. They're mitigating that response. They're taking precautions. These are preemptive strikes. So we deal with that information in this section. We don't have to go through all of that. Afurakani, OBARIMA, Afurakani man does not participate in the chemical and biological destruction of and warfare against himself and our people. And Afurakani, OBARIMA man wages war against the enemy. We must also realize that the plantation overseer who rode around on a horse to make sure that Afuraitkaitnit on the plantation were terrorized, whipped, maimed, murdered, jailed, and would not escape, still exists in the form of the city overseer, which is the overseer or officer or police officer. Police brutality is nothing new in our community, for the position of officer began during the enslavement of our people with the plantation overseer. However, the most important part of the story of enslavement is rarely told, as stated in our work Mate Masiye. It is a grave error to believe that Afuraitkaitnit people accepted slavery. It is estimated that 50,000 plus Afuraitkaitnit per year during the centuries of physical slavery freed themselves. Liberation from slavery took many forms, the most important being the example of the Akwamu, the warriors and warrioresses, whom are often referred to as maroons, runaways, and outliers. Those of us who held on to our ancestral traditions are those who liberated ourselves from slavery and went on to build sovereign, independent nations. Not far from the plantations, we established the fundamental institutions of nationhood in our environment: food production and preservation, healing practices, a military structure, cultural instruction, institutionalization of values, government, building of shelter, production of clothes. When the white slavers would come to attack these independent Afuraitkaitnit, attempting to drag them back into slavery, they came in contact with the formidable Afuraitkaitnit military. In many areas, we fought wars against the white slavers for decades. During these times, the liberated, independent Afuraitkaitnit would descend on the plantation, burn them down, kill the slave master and the members of his household, and liberate our Afuraitkaitnit brothers and sisters who were still enslaved on the plantation. We would then return to the liberated zone in greater numbers. We deal with that in detail in this section. Akodi in the Akhan language means arm, armament, artillery, weapons, things of war. The planet Benna and the male Obosom operating through that planet is the same spirit force operating through as your immune system. The root of the name Benna is Ben, which means to become red by boiling, hot, fire. The energetic effect of Benna on your body is the stimulation of your immune response. Your immune system's success is dependent on the proper levels of iron in your blood. Benna uses iron, arms, weapons to wage war against cancer cells in your body. Your immune system is the military structure within your being. It is always in operational mode. Every moment of every day and night, the immune system cells constantly seek out and destroy cancerous cells, the internal threat to our existence, and toxins streaming in from the outside, the external threat to our existence. The Afurakani OBARIMA, man recognizes the reality that there are always internal and external threats to our community in operation at all times. The whites and their offspring, their culture, and their pseudo-religions are the external threat. The misguided Afuraitkaitnit who embrace the whites and their offspring, their culture, and pseudo-religions are the internal threat. The Afurakani OBARIMA recognizes both threats and eradicates and neutralizes them accordingly. Every time you leave the house, go into a store, drive a car, go into a school, move within a neighborhood, you must be conscious, aware that an incident can arise at any moment. The decision you make can determine whether or not you are imprisoned, murdered, or protected. You must arm yourself with the weapons that are suitable to your spirit. Metal armaments, chemical and biological armaments, mental, intellectual armaments, spiritual, psychological armaments are all necessary components for our defense and offense. For the whites and their offspring continuously launch offensive after offensive against us, physically, chemically, including the creation of diseases, mentally, intellectually, and spiritually, psychologically, including these pseudo-religions that control the minds of hundreds of millions of our people, and therefore the behavior. An Okufo, a warrior, must know his terrain. He must know who, what, and where his resources are. He must know the possible dangers existing at all times and operate with intelligence. When in a war, the two most important goals of the Okumfo, the warrior, while protecting his people, is number one, to exterminate the enemy, and number two, to avoid being murdered or captured by the enemy. This is essential for the reestablishment of sovereignty, self-rule, and the maintenance of sovereignty. It is wholly unnatural for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit to exist under the rule of anyone other than ourselves. It is wholly unnatural to exist under the rule of our enemy. Akode on every level, armament on every level are necessary to realize these goals. The destruction of the enemy is the preservation of the just and the defense and maintenance of Nyamewa, Nyame Nsheshe, divine order, the balance in male and female. It is the defense and protection of what we have built, the divinely ordered institutions that we have established. It is the absolute protection of our women, our children, our honorable elders and eldresses, our families, our relations, our oman, our ethnicity. This is what we live for. We give our lives to, through, and for Inyamewa, Inyame, Insheshe. And as we dealt with that with regard to OBARIMA and the Obosom Benna, that also applies to the Obosom Mentu, Mentura. And we want to pull up some information with regard to that text that we dealt with regard to Amenhotep II and the Stela of Amenhotep. Before we get to that section, we want to go through the chat room. If you have a question or a comment on the phone line, hit the number 1. If you like to interact in the chat room, you must log in with a username in order to interact in the chat room. If you do not have a username in Blog Talk, you can sign up for one very quickly, and you'll be able to interact in the chat room. Okay, so we want to check that out real quick. Make sure we didn't miss any questions or comments in the chat room before we look at this Stela of Amenhotep. Okay, before we go to the Stela of Amenhotep II and his Asiatic campaign dealing with that warfare connected with the divinity Mentu, we have a call on the phone line. Michiawo, greetings on the phone line, number 5580. You had a question or a comment?
Yes, sir. I just like to say I really thank you for how you relate the warriors to the body parts, how everything is related. That's pretty interesting to me.
Okay, we appreciate that. We appreciate the call, and definitely we must, when we deal with the forces in nature, the spirit forces that animate the sun, the moons, the stars, the black substance of space, the planets, the oceans, the rivers, everything in creation, the spirit forces that animate every aspect of creation, every feature of creation, they have centers of resonance within our physical bodies as well. We are a microcosm of that macrocosm. And their centers of resonance, our organs and organ systems, are the shrines for these divinities within our body. And they execute the same functions within our body that they execute within the great divine body. And just as they operate through the sun, the explosive firepower of the sun, we have solar energy within us as well, and it will manifest through hormonal secretion as explosive power of adrenaline when it's time to wage war. And that explosive power is the energy of Mentu that we utilize to wage war against our enemies. So definitely we have to connect on every level the forces in nature, their relationship to us, and how we need to function day to day, moment to moment, lifetime to ancestral life to lifetime. Okay, Medasa, we appreciate that call. All right, we just want to check the chat room real quick before we move. Okay, Okay, one quick question. Was there ever a use for hemp, marijuana, tobacco that was in line with divine order? The key with regard to that, or any plant, period, any plant, any mineral, and so forth. The reason that people are using marijuana, hemp, tobacco, and things like that is because people are trying to get high. That's what they're doing. Now, you will find some Negroes trying to manufacture pseudo-metaphysical reasons, pseudo-cosmological reasons, pseudo-spiritual reasons why they must get high. But in reality, your Kra, your soul, your divine consciousness, never directs you to get high, never directs you to take in substances that will distort your consciousness and disalign your spirit, your sumsum, from your Kra. Just like any other substance, a plant, the leaves of the plant, the root of the plant can be used medicinally, minerals can be used medicinally and so forth. That has nothing to do with rolling up a joint, lighting it up, pulling that smoke into your lungs. That smoke becomes carcinogenic. It destroys sperm cells, ovum cells. The synaptic cleft in the brain becomes widened. The transmission between one neuron to the next becomes slower and so forth. And this is why people become dizzy and so forth and fuzzy in their thinking and everything else. And at the same time, not only does it pollute the Obosom, but it also pollutes our perception. We begin to be susceptible to the suggestion of discarnate, perverse, wayward spirits as we are disaligned from our own crowd. So that's just true across the board, whether it's that substance or any other substance. If people are utilizing these substances to stimulate them to get high and so forth, you know they are engaged in self-destructive behavior and has nothing, even when they pretend like they're talking about medical marijuana, but in reality they just want to get high and have an excuse for it. Even though they have other options, but they don't want to explore the other options, they just want to get high. Negroes try to find a way to get high. That's the bottom line. Because our people are addicted to these drugs. And when people are drug addicts, they don't want to admit that they're drug addicts. Some people drink alcohol on a regular basis. They won't admit the fact that they're an alcoholic and they are addicted to the drug. They will pretend like they're just having a drink. You have other individuals who are addicted to marijuana. They are drug addicts. They don't want to admit the reality that they are drug addicts, no different than an alcoholic or a crackhead. But they are. So as long as people are making excuses, they will come up with all kinds of foolish rationalizations. Those rationalizations are first founded and formulated by the whites and their offspring, our enemies, to flood into our community and feed the minds of our people. And our people picked up those foolish rationalizations and began to promote them. And even when they died, they still promote them as spirits of disorder, trying to convince you to engage in self-destructive behavior from the spirit realm as well. So that's key. Okay, so we want to get to, there are a couple of stelae from Amenhotep II. And in fact, we'll put in the chat room right quick. Of course, you can find these different stelae all over the internet. So there are many sites that, in different ways, they have this information laid out. So we put that link in the chat room. One of them dealing with the Amada Stela. And the reason why we want to go into this information, many of the kings, many of the Ensu, the sovereigns, whether it's Amenhotep II or Ramesu II in the Battle of Kadesh and so forth, they talked about the divinity Mentu. When they talk about the divinity Mentu and they're raging like Mentu, the god of war and so forth, they're not just speaking in poetic terms. This is the difference between the whites and their offspring reading text, repeating text, translating text, and black people who are imitating the whites and their offspring reading text and repeating what they've read and not understanding text in reality. When we're dealing with these forces in nature and they're mentioning these forces in nature, we're talking about the same process that we use today, where they're talking about raging like Mentu, the divinity. They're talking about, on one hand, in certain cases, spirit possession, Akhan. On the other hand, spirit communication, being guided by this force in nature, empowered by this force in nature. The divinity is part of their blood circle. When we're named after Mentu, Mentu-Hetep the first, and Mentu-Hetep the second, and so forth, Mentu-Hetep bringing balance back to nature, balance back to the nature of the nation after the quote-unquote intermediate period. Mentu-Hetep comes along, takes the reins of rulership, and brings the nation back together, brings the balance back to the nation, named after the divinity. They're not just named after the divinity because they like the name of the divinity. They're not just naming themselves after a deity because they like the way they move and they just want to identify themselves like someone saying, I like Shaka Zulu, so I'm going to name myself Shaka Zulu. That divinity has possessed their people. That divinity operates through their blood circle. This is a force of nature they invoke, get possessed by, get guided by, get moved by, directed by, and trained by to wage war against the enemy. Guides them in battle in real time. The same kind of spirit possession that takes place in Vodou, that takes place in the Akhan tradition, and in the Yoruba tradition, and in the various traditions wherever Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people are on the continent, as well as in the Western Hemisphere, and Hoodoo and Juju and Voodoo and so forth. Spirit possession and communication takes place amongst us because it was taking place amongst us back then. They were being possessed by Mentu. That's why they were raging like Mentu. They're being guided by Mentu. That's why they were raging like Mentu and fighting like Mentu. So this is what they're dealing with. So we have direct experiential knowledge of what these texts really mean because we still get possessed by and communicate with these exact same divinities, including Mentu or Muntu. So if you look at this stele of Amenhotep, the Amara stele, and 1 second real quick. Okay, so we don't have to go through the entire piece. We'll look at specific excerpts of it because this is ancestral. We're talking about an ancestral precedent for the waging of war, the ancestral precedent for connecting with Mentu, the ancestral precedent for connecting with the Satiu, the ancient archers in our blood circle, the ancestral precedent for reconnecting with that divinity who motivates some of our people who are children of that divinity to utilize that same form of warfare, that archery, that snipership, that marksmanship today, to wage war against our enemies today in an effective fashion today. So this is an ancestral precedent for that, laid out for us to utilize today when we deal with Sankofa, return, go, and grasp. We can return, go, and grasp from our ancestral past. The events, the triumphs of our ancestresses and ancestors. Utilize that information for today, apply it to today, and utilize it just as effectively today as we did in the past. So it talks about on the Amara Stele, year 3, the 3rd month of the 3rd season, day 15, Amenhotep, beloved of Herakuti and Amen, the master of Ta'apet, so-called Thebes, the great divinity, creation of Ra, sovereign who came forth from the body mighty, likeness of Heru, upon the throne of his father, great in strength whose like does not exist, of whom a second is not found. He is a king of very weighty arms. There is none who can draw his bow among his army, among the hill country sheikhs, or among the princes of retinue, because his strength is much greater than that of any king who has ever existed, raging like a panther. When he courses through the battlefield, there is none fighting before him. An archer, sniper, mighty in smiting, a wall-protecting Kamit, firm of heart, in the hour of conflict, trampling down those who rebel against him. prevailing against all of the barbarians, all of the crooked police, with people and horses, when they come with myriads of men, while they knew not that Amun-Ra was his ally, nor that he would be seen to approach instantly, strength in his arms, the likeness of the divinity men in the year of terror. There is not one that saves himself from him. He makes a slaughter among his enemies. All lands and all rebellious countries pay him impulse, for he is a king. There is not one who makes a boundary for him, but they live by his breath. King of kings, ruler of rulers, who captures the boundaries of all, the only mighty one, whose fame is exalted until Ra in heaven knows it, and the one who faces in the day of smiting. There is no boundary made for him toward all countries united, or toward all lands together, but they fall instantly because of his flaming crest. There is none among them that escapes from the overthrow, like the foes of boss-headed divinity, the warrioress cat-headed divinity, on the road of Amen. It is a happy chance for all those who know that he is his real son, who came forth from his limbs, meaning from Amen, one with him, in order to rule that which the sun encircled, all the lands and countries which he knew, that he might seize them immediately with victory and power. He is a king with heart favorable to the buildings of all the divinity, being one who builds their temples and fashions their statues. The divine offerings are established for the first time, loaves and drink in plenty, and fowl, birds in multitude, as a daily offering every day forever. Large cattle and small cattle at their season. He gave the house to its master, supplied with everything, with oxen, calves, young cattle, fowl without limit, this temple being supplied throughout with loaves and wine, the revenues for the first time for his fathers, the divinities to be seen of the people, to be known of all. Behold, his majesty beautifies the temple which his father, the king of Upper and Lower Kemet, Min Keper Ra Suhuti Mesu III, had made for his father. All the deities, built of stone, as an everlasting work. The walls around it are of brick, the doors of cedar, the best cedar of the terraces. The doorways are of sandstone, in order that the great name of his father, the son of Ra, Tehuti Mesu III, may remain in this temple forever and ever. Before we even go forward with that, so first we talk about Amenhotep II being strong of arm, mighty of the bow, waging war against the enemy, checking the enemy, shooting the enemy, killing the enemy like no other, killing these barbarians, killing these sheikhs, killing these crackers, whether they're Asians or Caucasians, waging war against the barbarians, the so-called soldiers of the enemy, the so-called police of the enemy, waging war with his bow, and he's stronger than any other king before him. There's none like him. When he shoots his bow like Mentu, the archer, the sniper, after they deal with his power as an archer, as a sniper, as a warrior, they immediately begin to deal with how he deals with the daily offerings of the temples, in the temples of the divinity, how he aligns himself ritually by giving offerings to the forces in nature, so that he can align his thoughts, intentions, and actions consistently with the forces in nature, because it is they who guide his arm when he stretches his bow and snipes the enemy. Then they talk about how he established the temple and rejuvenated the temple, sparing no expense, because there's a connection between ancestral religion and waging war to exterminate our enemies. There's always a balance between being fed and rejuvenated and replenished by the energy of the Obosom, and once we're fed and rejuvenated and replenished by that energy, then we expend that energy towards the extermination of our enemy. We expend that energy towards the extermination of our enemy. So this is why the waging of war is followed up immediately with the offerings to the Obosom, the offerings to the divinities, the offering and establishing of the temple to Huti Mesu III, who is now an ancestor in this text. So they deal with deity invocation, with the giving of offerings. Then they deal with ancestral evocation, the giving of offerings and establishing the shrines of the ancestresses and ancestors to honor the ancestresses and ancestors. We are empowered by the forces in nature to wage war. We are guided in that use of power by the ancestresses and ancestors. We're empowered by the Obosom, guided by the Nsamanfo. It is the power of the Obosom is dispensed by Nyamewa Nyame to the forces in nature according to their nature and kind and function in creation. That power is given to us because we are children of the Obosom. However, we come through specific clans, and the manner in which we utilize the energy of Mentu in one clan will be slightly different than the way the energy of Mentu is used by another clan. So therefore, the ancestresses and ancestors, the Nananom Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, those who were venerable, those who were honorable, who lived an honorable life, lived their lives in harmony with divine order, that class of ancestresses and ancestors have the responsibility and the capacity to guide us harmoniously because they navigated life harmoniously. They established that precedent. Now they have the capacity and are given the responsibility from Nyamewa Nyame, or by Nyamewa Nyame, to guide us towards navigating our thoughts, intentions, and actions in harmony with divine order. And when it comes to warfare, Akodi, we are guided on how to utilize our weapons of warfare and our tactics of warfare to exterminate our enemies while not creating disorder with our own oman, our own people, and our own selves, and our Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit world body in the process, without destroying Asase Afua, the earth mother, without destroying our people and our oman, the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit nation in the process. We wage war against the enemy. We strike the target, clean strike, without destroying ourselves. So the Nsamanfo show us how to wage war in a harmonious fashion. Harmony meaning you destroy the target and preserve that which is just. So you see this direct line between waging war, invoking the Obosom, evoking the ancestresses and ancestors. This is the aspect of these texts that are brought to life through our culture. That the whites and their offspring do not understand, and Negroes who follow along with the whites and their offspring in their interpretations don't understand. When we're talking about Mentu, we're talking about possession, communication, direct experience. We're talking about the giving of offerings. We're not just talking about ceremoniously laying some animal offerings and food offerings and drink offerings on a shrine and engaging in some pomp and circumstance. We're not just engaged in pseudo-rituals. We place offerings on the shrine, the energy emanating from that plant life or that mineral life or that animal life or whatever we are using, it's specifically designed to provoke the energy of the Obosom. When we provoke that energy, it's like if you push a lion, you provoke the lion to respond with that fiery energy. If you put offerings out in a ritual capacity, you provoke the energy of the Obosom, you provoke a response, and they emanate their energy and project their energy towards us so we can receive it, be empowered, rejuvenated, so we can move forward and wage war against our enemies in a harmonious fashion. So let's go forward with that text. The majesty of this great God, King of Upper and Lower Kemet, Lord of the two lands, Keper Ra, extended the line and loosened for all of the fathers, the divinities, making for it a great pylon of sandstone opposite the hall of the sacred chamber in the august dwelling, surrounded by the columns of sandstone as an everlasting work, many tables with vessels of silver and bronze, oblation standards, altars, fire pans, talking about oblation standards, dealing with ritual washing and so forth, altars, fire and so forth. So we're dealing with the same implements that we have on our shrines today: fire, vessels of water for ritual purification, washing, akwagware, soul washing, and so forth, as well as the various offerings. Then His Majesty caused that this tablet should be made and set up in this temple, in the place of the station of the king, and engraved with the great name of the Lord of the two lands, the son of Ra, Amenhotep II, divine ruler of Anu, in the house of the fathers, the divinities, after the return of His Majesty from Retinue the Upper, having overthrown all his enemies, extending the boundaries of Kamit on the first victorious campaign. So it's talking about after waging war against the whites and their offspring, destroying them, possessed by Mentu, guided by Amen himself. Then he comes back and makes those offerings to the Obosom to align himself with them, thanks them and so forth, align himself with the ancestresses and ancestors, thanks them ritually through these ritual practices, and then he's directed by them to establish this stela, this record, this true historical record of what took place, not just for true historical purposes, so that his posterity, us, will be able to go back to this record, Sankofa, and not only learn what took place in the past, but what is the precedent set by which we may be successful by waging war against the enemy in the present. How do we invoke Mentu through these ritual offerings? Evoke the Nananong Nsamanfo through these ritual offerings at the shrine, so that we can become those archers, those snipers that tear down, rip apart, cleave the enemy, these criminal beasts that are murdering our people every single day. How do we take them out? What is the precedent that is set? And it is laid out through this true historical document. The protocols are laid out ritually, cosmologically, culturally. This is part of our what we have received, our inheritance, given to his posterity, which is us. When His Majesty returned with joy at heart to his father Amen, he slew with his own weapon the 7 princes who had been in the district of Tekisi and had been placed head downward at the prow of His Majesty's bark, his boat, the name of which was Keper Ra, is the established of the two lands. One hanged the 6 men of those fallen ones before the wall of Ta'apet, so-called Thebes, those hands likewise. Then the other fallen one was taken upriver to Khanat, quote-unquote Nubia, and hanged on the wall of Napata, in order to cause to be manifest the victories of His Majesty forever and ever in all lands and all countries, in the land of the people of ancient Khanat, since he had taken the southerners and hound the northerners, the backlands of the whole earth upon which Ra shines, that he might make his boundary as far as he desired. None opposing his hand, according to the command of his father Ra, according to Amen, Master, Lord of Thebes, in order that the son of Ra, his body, his beloved, Amenhotep II, divine ruler of Anu, might be given life, stability, satisfaction, joy of heart through him like Ra forever and ever. So that final piece is talking about after he returned, connected with Amen, with joy in his heart, slaying the enemies, those who rose up against him. Then he hung them in effigy, hung them in a public place so that people could see, when you wage war against us, we are going to exterminate you. And we're going to leave a record, your dead body, hanging for all the public to see. This is what happens when you come against us, when we're empowered by the Obosom to move forward and cut you down. So this is the precedent established by our ancestors and ancestors with regard to what we do with the enemy, how we wage war against the enemy, and how we show the enemy in the future what will be done to them when they come against us. No one can stop the males empowered and possessed by Mentu. Nobody can stop that archer. Nobody can stop that sniper. When we get heat, we don't talk about the heat we have. The only time the heat is known to exist is when it is taking the enemy out. And every Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit person must be armed on every level. Now we're going to look in the chat room and see if we have any more questions or comments. We see some information. We see that some people have posted some things. And the question is there a way to invoke the Ntoru into someone outside of ourselves, or to draw them down ritually into an entire group or community during a time of war, or to win a particular battle? So on one hand, the second part is absolutely, whether we're drawing sacred symbols like in Vodun, they use veves, and in Akhan tradition, the adinkra symbols, and as well as oshue poured into the ground. It takes the form of specific pattern. For example, you pour water into the ground ritually, one means of divination, one means of invocation of the Obosom. Pouring libation, as you're invoking the Obosom and the Nananum Nsamanto. And the water, as it takes a specific shape on the ground, it will be manipulated by the Obosom to take a specific form, and you can read that form as the water takes that form and stains the ground, and stains the sand, stains the earth, and so forth. But then it also becomes a matrix. It also becomes a womb. It also becomes a magnet and temporary shrine to pull the energy of the Obosom down, and they come down. One of the definitions for Ndu in Akhan is not only medicine, but also a presentiment, a foreboding, and a lighting of a spirit, the deity, the spirit coming down. Of course, in our book, Hoodoo People, we talk about the root of the term hoodoo, not only meaning ritual medicine, root work, but also meaning to conjure. And when we conjure the Obosom, they come down and take up residence amongst us. Of course, it's the famous scene in Guacamai in Haiti before the beginning of the revolution. They called down the Loa, the Vodun. And when they called down the Vodun in ritual ceremony, ritual song, ritual dance, ritual sacrifice, the divinities come down, possess people, animate people, and we move forward and wage war. So that takes place on a regular basis. You see it even just in general. You see it go to a Bembe in the Yoruba tradition, and the Orisha comes down in the circle. Go to an Akwamu, the Akhan tradition, people dancing in that counterclockwise circle, and the Obosom come down and possess the people, one or more people, at the same time, and communicate with the people and direct the people. Now, with regard to, let me scroll back up, specific question, is there a way to invoke the Ntoru, Neteru divinities into someone outside of ourselves? The Krab, the Ori, the Kayat, the soul, the divine consciousness in the head region of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people is a divinity in and of itself. Anytime someone gets possessed by another divinity like Benna, Ogun, and so forth, or Mentu, the different divinities, it is by the permission of the Okra, which is the deity that governs your head. The only time a divinity will take up residence and possess is first and foremost if they are directed to by Inyame wa Inyame. So it's never a situation that we decide, oh, we're going to invoke a divinity. We're only going to invoke a divinity if we're guided to do so by Inyame wa Inyame. And when that divinity comes for a specific purpose, then they will possess who they need to possess based on what that person's pra allows. And that, of course, the person's pra will allow possession from another force in nature because that's part of their colleagues. The Kra is a divinity, other forces in nature are divinities as well. They will possess under the direction of Inyame wa Inyame. So we never just arbitrarily or decide, well, I want to invoke this deity because I want to achieve this specific result. We don't do it that way. It's actually the reverse. We attune to Inyame wa Inyame first. We pour in libation. In our Akhan tradition, we hold the vessel up to Inyame wa Inyame. We show them the drink, but we do not offer them the drink, and then we pour libation, but we invoke the Supreme Being first. We invoke the Creator and Creatress, and Yonkumpon and Yonkumpon, which is Ra and Ra'et. We invoke the various other divinities. We're calling on them. Then we seek to align with them. And when we align with them, depending on if it is their time to come and possess at a specific time for a specific reason, we are aligning ourselves with that so we can come to know what the divine order is for this particular situation, this particular circumstance. So we align with them. And when we align with them, then we make ourselves receptive to them. And then they come down and take up residence in the body. So even though from the outside looking in, it looks like people are pouring libation, making sacrifices, engaging in ritual song and dance, calling on specific Obosom, and they come down as though they're calling because we asked them to come down. In reality, we align with the Supreme Being first, we align with those forces in nature, and we make ourselves receptive to their movement. And then we put ourselves in position so we can receive them optimally and fully, and so they can move through us and execute their function through us. And those who are Akumfo and Abosomfo, priests and priestesses who serve as vessels, the hoodoo man, hoodoo woman, juju man, juju woman, and so forth, who serve as vessels for these Obosom, take up residence in them and operate through them to communicate with the community, then they, when they're receptive, they do so. Okay, and there's another question. Can we add the Medjay in libation to get the cave ones? So the Medjay or the Medjai in ancient Kemet, talking about the Khanit Nubian warriors, and warrior says, yes, you can do that because, of course, we're not just talking about ancient Medjay or Medjai. These same individuals are in our blood circles. They reincarnated and became the warriors, and warrior says the Akumfo in the Yoruba tradition, the Akumfo in the Akhan tradition, and in the Ebe tradition, the Dahomian warriors and warriors, and so forth. They returned through Bebra reincarnation to wage war at that time. They reincarnated once again to wage war against the whites and offspring here in the Western Hemisphere. So when we began to kill the whites and offspring and burn down plantations, those same Medjai were the same individuals who have returned. And some of us are those warriors and warriors says today, waging war on every level, physical, chemical and biological, intellectual, spiritual, and so forth. So yes, you can include those specific ancestresses and ancestors of your blood circle who are warriors and warriors says, who wage war according to divine order, meaning they attack the target without creating disorder within our community in the process. So absolutely, you can include them. Okay. And we just want to say, oh, and Medase for putting that notification in the chat room. There are 15 minutes left in the live portion of the broadcast as far as online. If you want to listen beyond 11 o'clock, you must call onto the phone line before 11 o'clock, because at 11, those who are just listening online, you'll be cut off. The sound will be cut off, but the people who are on the phone line will be able to hear beyond 11 o'clock. And we probably won't have to go much beyond 11 o'clock, but the number is 657-383-0635, 657-383-0635. All right, so let's scroll back up. Thought I saw we had a couple of more questions in the chat room. All right, so question is, so when we have an issue need, we bring that before Nyame, and they send the Obosom that is needed. So yes, that's the basic process. You align every time we go to our shrines, every time we communicate with our crowd, we engage in ritual practice, whether it's Susu home meditation, pouring libation to evoke the Nsamanfo or invoke the Obosom. We begin with aligning with Amenet and Amen, or Nyamewa, Nyame, the great mother and great father of all. And when we align with them and we're bringing those issues to them, and of course we're not speaking in English, they're not attuning to that. They already can see and feel the yearnings that we have and the things that we image within our spirits, and they align with that. So even if you don't open your mouth and you just contemplate on those things, they know what situation you're in. They know what is causing disorder and discomfort and disalignment, and they attune to that. So we invoke Nyamewa, Nyame first, and then we invoke the Obosom, and invoke the Nananoman Samako, and then we communicate directly with them to align with them and listen to see where is it that we are out of order, what forces in nature govern that, and those Obosom will come forward, directed by Nyamewa, Nyame, to come forward, because they govern a certain aspect of creation and certain kinds of events that reflect that kind of energy. So yes, starting with Nyamewa, Nyame, the Obosom, the Nananoman Samako, when we align with them and make ourselves receptive to them, then they direct the Obosom to come forward and deal with whatever issue we need to be dealt with. And also energize us and guide us so that we can utilize our own power to overcome obstacles as well. They have their responsibilities, but we also have ours. Sometimes what happens when people join, quote unquote, the Yoruba tradition, like joining a church or something, which you really can't do if you're not Yoruba, you're not that. If you're not Akhan, you're not Akhan. You need to find out, of course, exactly who you are transcarnationally. Before the Muswa Kessier, the great perversity, the enslavement era, came about, you were living somewhere on the continent in a previous existence. You made a transition, whether it was there or here. You were an ancestor or ancestress in the spirit realm. Generations later, your descendants, one of your descendants, copulates with someone and draws you into the womb, and you're born back again into the world. So you're the same Afurakani or Afuraitkaitnit spirit from Afuraitkaitnit from hundreds of years ago, from that same clan. You have returned now, even though there was blood mixture and so forth because of the plantations and warfare and enslavement and so forth, but you're the same spirit operating through this body. As we said previously, you can mix blood, but you cannot mix the soul. So when you're recognize who you are, find out what your identity is, what your clan affiliation is, then you, of course, begin to embrace that culture, that language in your ritual practices. Prior to that, you can utilize the language of ancient Kemet to invoke the forces of nature and the Nsamanko, because, of course, that is the parent language of these various languages on the continent. So some people don't understand that. So somebody says, come to the Yoruba temple, they come and join the Yoruba temple. Somebody says, come to the Akhan, Obosom here, they come and join, quote unquote, the Akhan tradition, even though they're not really that. So at that point, they're just acting like it's a church. And then our people began to utilize that same mindset that we brought to the churches and the mosques and the little Hebrew temples and all that nonsense, where you ask, the great spirit, the divinities and so forth, you're going through something, you're depressed, you pray and beg and ask for deliverance and so forth, and then hopefully a miracle happens and you're delivered. And if anything happens, you say, see how God works, and if things don't happen, you say, well, what's wrong? Maybe I'm doing the ritual wrong. But that's not the way we operate. The Obosom have their functions in creation. We have our functions in creation as Nipa, as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, human beings. Human beings are not Obosom. Nipa is not Obosom. A human being, or Nipa, has its own function in creation, its own value. It's like an animal, Abua, has its own value. It's like plant life has its own value. Indriya, the same is true of the Obosom. They have their own function, they have their own value. So we have our own function in creation as Onipa, powered by our own cry. And because we have a cry, we have a divine function. We have the energy of the Ba and the Ba'et animating us. So we have to operate and function and execute our function and live our lives, but the Obosom have their functions in creation as well. And those functions meet. If we get out of alignment with those forces in nature, then there's a problem, because we're trying to execute our function, or maybe we're not executing our function, and we run into all kinds of discordance. It's like you have breath in your body, but of course it connects with the air outside. So, of course, if you begin to poison the little breath you have in your body, then that's not in alignment with the air that's outside that you're trying to bring in and purify yourself, so you're disaligning yourself. And when you're pulling these toxins into your body, and then you start getting sick, you don't sit down and pray to, the spirit saying, deliver me from illness. yes, you align with the forces of nature, but then they show you need to stop putting these poisons in your system. You need to recognize what you're doing. You have work to do as well, operating on your own power. But when you operate on your own power in harmony, then you can link your power, your small little portion of the great Bayat energy, with the power of the forces in nature. So it operates where we meet together. We meet with the Supreme Being, the Great Mother and Great Father, the forces in nature, the Nananomans, the ancestors. We meet their energy with ours so we can be realigned, so we can function harmoniously. Okay, so let us want to make sure we didn't miss anything else. Thought we just want to make sure we didn't miss that particular comment. Okay, and it looks like I think we got to that particular question. All right, so we have a call on the phone line. Michiawo on the phone line, number 6482. You had a question or a comment?
Yes. My question was, when you have a family and, the children are born, is it possible for people to be born into the same family, but they're from different clans?
Yes, it is. Because of what has taken place with us, that is definitely possible. There could be some children, somebody has, men and women have two children. One of the children can be an ancestor or an ancestress from the mother's side, one of the mother's great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother that comes through, and the next child could be from the father's side, one of the great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers of the father. So you have two children in the house. One could actually be Akhan and one could actually be Yoruba. So that is possible. And that does take place. Okay. Now, those are things that we have to understand, because when we learn about, culture in general, and we're learning from, say, somebody from the continent, and they say, well, in the Akhan tradition, we are matrilineal, and your identity is based on your mother's clan and so forth. Yes, that is true, based on how things were established by Akhan people with the Obosom, with the Nsamanfo, when all the Akhan people were living amongst other Akhan people and we were all doing our thing normal. But once things became disrupted, we have to understand, as we did a broadcast, the ramification of reincarnation, the spiritics of rebirth. We must understand the dynamics that take place and why certain ancestresses and ancestors come back through certain blood circles. And even if we connect with somebody who's not of the same Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ethnic heritage, sometimes we bring back some of our own people, sometimes we bring back some of their people. And depending on who's brought back, the child is going to be naturally inclined towards that ancestral culture when it's presented to them. So if the father came from the Igbo side and the mother came from the, Akhan side and so forth, that child, one of the children, will be inclined towards Igbo culture more than anything else, but they still respect Akhan culture, and the other child will be drawn towards Akhan culture and iconography and motifs and everything else, even though they will respect Igbo culture, but they'll be naturally drawn to their ancestral culture. And when we understand that, we will give them an Akhan name, and the other child will have an Igbo name. No different than if, somebody on the continent who's from Ghana visited Nigeria and married a Nigerian. An Akhan and a Yoruba person get married, then they make a decision about when they have children, what kind of names are they going to have. And if they're really engaged in culture and not corrupted by Islam and Christianity, they would do divination, find out the provenance of the spirit, and they would make a determination about what kind of name they should have and the manner in which they will, embrace culture. So we must keep those things in mind, because that's a very important question, a good question. We must recognize the ramifications of reincarnation when we're making decisions and dealing with, our children, our descendants.
Okay, thank you.
And may I say we appreciate that call. Okay, we have one more call on the phone line. And once again, we have 4 minutes left. As far as the online actually a little bit over 3 minutes left. So if you want to listen beyond 11 o'clock, you must call in within the next 3 minutes, 657-383-0635, 657-383-0635. Okay, Ichiawo on the phone line number 8581. You had a question or a comment?
Michiamo. I was hearing you saying reincarnation, and then there's a word before you said it is Deborah. Are you saying that, or am I just not hearing it correctly?
Oh, no, I was saying we did a we did a broadcast, and it's called Bebra Sim, and Bebra means to come forward. It's talking about rebirth or reincarnation. Asim means affairs or issues. So Bebra Sim is the term that we use for the issues or the affairs of Bebra, reincarnation. So we called that broadcast Bebra Sim. The subtitle is The Ramifications of Reincarnation, dealing with the issues surrounding reincarnation, the dynamics of that, and the ramifications of that. So we did a broadcast. You can look on the YouTube page, Debra Sim, The Ramifications of Reincarnation.
That Debra, how is it spelled? Debra?
Yes.
How is that spelled? Oh, it's spelled
right.
That way, as I said it? Oh, okay. All right, I have another question. With the fictional characters, along with Moses and all of them, does Perpetua and Felicity, do they go in that line as well?
Okay, say again. You said the fictional characters.
Yeah, under the fictional characters of all of the false religions and things like that, is Perpetua and Felicity in that same ramification? You put them in that same, have you ever heard of Perpetua and Felicity? The saints is what they call them.
Okay, so when they're talking about the saints, Perpetua and Felicity, typically when they're talking about these saints, and of course there's a difference between, like the Protestant Christianity and then the Orthodox, so-called Orthodox churches, Catholic churches and Orthodox churches and all of that. It's the Orthodox churches and the Catholic churches and all of them that deal with so-called saints, whereas the Protestants don't really deal with the saints. So when they're talking about these saints, these martyrs and all of that, they're typically talking about people who were living. They were martyrs. This is the little story about them, Perpetua and Felicity. They were martyrs, basically dying for the faith and so forth. And once they die, honor them as martyrs for the church, and they call them saints and all this other stuff. All that really means, if these people existed, and of course they say that they existed, but if they did, all that simply means is when people are dying, people are communicating with their deceased relatives. That's it. The Whites and Offspring add these little titles, saint, beatification, going through some little silly process where they beatify somebody and now they're a spirit that can help other people out. All of that doesn't mean anything. They have no power to beatify or raise anyone to sainthood and all this other nonsense. They can go through these little silly rituals all they want. That doesn't do anything for the deceased spirit. The Whites and their offspring have no capacity to elevate any position of a discarnate spirit. These are the same spirits that are still hanging around earthbound before the little ritual that they did and now. So these individuals, Perpetua and Felicity, they'll say that they were martyrs of the Christian church, no different than these other deceased so-called martyrs and so forth. If they really existed and they were martyrs for the Christian church, that simply means that they were brainwashed. If they were black, that simply means that they were brainwashed with a fake religion. They were perpetuating that nonsense and they got killed. If they were black people, then as soon as they made their transition, they realized that none of those characters in the Bible existed, so they wasted their entire lives, perpetuating that nonsense. So if they were sensible, then when they make their transition, they will stop trying to direct their descendants to embrace that foolish pseudo-religion. But all that is so-called sainthood is just people communicating with their deceased relatives.
Okay. And then one other question, Abyssinia and Ethiopia, which one is like before the other? Is one older than the other, or are they the same thing? Abyssinia. Am I saying that right?
Well,
Abyssinia.
Right, Abyssinia. So they're kind of, in a sense, they're kind of co-equal because Ethiopia, well, for example, you will find the etymology of Ethiopia. They'll say it means burnt faces and so forth. Other people have other, etymologies that they found. Some people have looked into the language of ancient Kemet to see if they could find the origin of the Greek perversion Ethiopia, to see, and some people associate it with the highest mountain in ancient Kemet and things like that. And the same thing with Abyssinia. But either way, saying Ethiopia and saying Abyssinia or Abyssinia, that's still a later corruption. In ancient times, thousands of years ago, nobody was using the term Ethiopia. When the whites and offspring came aboard, that corruption begins to be used, Ethiopia and Abyssinia. Ancient times, you have Ta'aku, which is the land of the ancestral spirits, south and southeast in ancient Kemet. The areas now that are divided up, so you'll see parts of Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, parts of Somalia and all of that. The eastern portion, because you have directly south, which is now the Sudan, ancient Khanat, Nubia directly south of Kemet, and not only south, but parts of east and west of the Hapi Valley, ancient Khanat. But then later on, you have southeast, you have these regions that were called Ta'aku, land of the ancestral spirits, Ta Ntoro, land of the divinities and so forth. But then other, those are just titles. Later on, Ta'aku, or Aku becomes Aksu and Aksum and Aksum and so forth. So all of those are later corruptions. Abyssinia, Ethiopia, Aksum, because Aksum is not ancient either, that's the corruption of Aku or Aksu, Ta'aku. So all of that comes later with the corruption.
All right, Madasi, for taking my call. And
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Madasi, we appreciate the call. All right, so I want to make sure we didn't miss anything else. So that was all of the questions in the chat room. So, Yedase, we thank you for tuning in once again. We will be back on tomorrow for Egua Marketplace. For those individuals who came in a little bit later, when you look on the links that we posted at the very top in the chat room, you see the links for the Feku Nanasom study group page on the website. You can form a study group with one or more people, whether it's online or in person. That's your own independent group. We do have a recommended curriculum, so go to the Feku page, and you'll see that curriculum beginning with our publications, Kuku Tuntun, The Ancestral Jurisdiction, Ugen Shang, Wavojira, and so forth. We have published 16 books. All of the ebook versions are free downloads from our website. We also sell the soft cover versions that we print in-house. They range between $8 and $11, and of course, any order of 10 books or more is automatically 30% off. We also have our distributor option if you would like to distribute our softcover books to generate income for yourself independently as an entrepreneur. You can do that as well. So when you go to the Nhoma page, the publications page on our website, you see all of the books. You can download all of them. You can make your order for the softcover books if you like to support the work that we are doing. But you can also, if you are unemployed or if you just want to generate additional income, you can become a distributor. As independent entrepreneur, you wouldn't be working for us, you're working for yourself, purchasing the books wholesale and selling them retail. So all of that information is on the Nhoma page. So again, Yedase, We thank you for tuning in. Also, check out our social media network that is separate from Facebook and Instagram, our own private network, Afuraitkaitnit.ning.com, Ning.com. Afuraitkaitnit.ning.com. So again, Yedase, we thank you for tuning in, and Yebeshia Bio, we will meet again.